Welcome to a new episode of Dementia Dialogue, number 6 in our series, Arts and Dementia, curated and hosted by Lisa Loiselle. Lisa's guests today are the Reverend Cynthia Hewling Hummel and Dr. Daniel Potts. You might recall that Cynthia co-hosted an episode with Lisa earlier in this series. Today, Cynthia talks more about how the arts became a part of her life and the new directions it has taken her. Similarly, Danny, as he is referred to, came to the arts, specifically poetry, through his father Lester, who developed dementia and who subsequently became an artist. Some of Lester's art is on our resource page. Let's listen in.
You're both involved in arts in different ways.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about the work that you've done in the arts, Cynthia? I see, people can't see, but I see behind you a beautiful piece of a beautiful quilt. And I'm imagining that is a quilt that you've made. I know you work in a lot of mediums. So
well, that one was a gift, but I do work in a lot of medium. I one of the things that got me started in the arts is I took an arts class for people living with dementia. And I know that we'll ask Danny to talk more about his art classes, but the one I took, we had a day where we were invited to make masks, anything that you wanted to do with a mask. And so I decided that I would make my mask around a theme of what it's like to live with dementia. And so I came home from that class with my mask and I made 35 more because I wanted to talk about what it feels like and the different experiences that I've had, with the thought that it might illustrate for people who wouldn't necessarily understand what it felt like to have that diagnosis. And then it was wonderful to be able to put them on display and have them become a talking point for people talking about, oh my gosh, that's what my mother was experiencing and we never knew. I just never thought about those things being associated with Alzheimer's or another dementia. So somebody said, you know what, you ought to just take pictures of your masks and make a book. And so that's what I did. And one of the most exciting things about my masks is 10 of them went to Stockholm and they were on display at the National Gallery of Art in Stockholm for the Dementia Conference 2 summers ago. And I have pictures of my masks, 10 of them in the gallery there. And it's like, oh my goodness gracious. But again, it just opens up the conversation about what it feels like. And it allows people to talk about the art itself. What does this mask make you feel like? But it also encourages dialogue between people living with a disease and a care partner, or somebody else in their circle. So I love doing art, and I never thought of myself as an artist until I was diagnosed with dementia. And now I'm painting and doing all kinds of different things. I just came from a painting class right before this. So I really feel like it just allows me to express myself in wonderful ways.
What a great tool to have those discussions about what your experience is like, because I think that's missing a lot, right? People are afraid. There's some fear there to ask questions about, what is that experience like for you? So what a great way to open up that conversation through your masks. Now, you referred to your book, which is UnMasking Alzheimer's, correct?
Yes, I brought it here to show you tonight. UnMasking Alzheimer's, the memories behind the masks. And so each mask has a story, and it's just a story of my mask when I wrote it at that time. But what I found from people who've bought the book or read the book is that it's just a jumping off point. What do you see in the mask? When I brought my mask down to visit with Danny and we spread them out and people talked about them, what did they feel when they looked at that mask or held that mask or put that mask up to their face? What did that feel like? Or what would they do if they had a mask? I've taught mask making classes where people with dementia, care partners, and people from the community have just sat down and made art together. And that's just such a wonderful experience because you can't tell who's got dementia and who doesn't. We're just all people sharing the joy of making art. And that's what it's about. It's not about whether or not you have a diagnosis. It's about living in the moment and just being able to feel the joy of the moment.
Mm-hmm. Cynthia, which of the masks do you think gets the most attention given to it. Can you kind of describe what that mask looks like and the meaning behind that particular mask?
Well, I did bring the one that that gets the most attention. I mean, different people have their favorites, and people will say to me, "Oh my goodness, I really like this one, and this is why." But I get a lot of comments about this one, and I call it Love Remembers, because even though I might not remember your name or Danny's name, when my mom, who died of Alzheimer's, when she died, she didn't remember my name, but there was something in her that remembered I was somebody that she loved. And so even though our brain may not be able to call up a name or the relationship, it remembers the love. And so that's what I envisioned, that we're also, my faith tells me that even when we don't remember, that God remembers us and that we're loved. But, it gets a lot of comments because people look at it as there's a lot of love in the caregiving relationship. And so it's a place where it's not such a controversial mask either. I have some that are a little bit harder to talk about. For example, the problem of incontinence. I have one where the mask is covered with a depends, because that's going to be the reality at some point for me. But this mask is something that everybody, can talk about love and who they're loved. There was a woman that stood in front of my exhibit one day, and the tears were just, rolling down her face. And I said, "What's going on? Do you want to talk about it?" She just started crying, and she said, "I never asked my husband, the one with dementia, I never asked him what he was feeling." And she said, "I wish I'd known. You've shared so many of your feelings, what you're feeling, and I never thought to ask him." And it was, you did the best you could. You loved him right till the end, and stop beating yourself up, and maybe share what you've learned with other care partners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what a great message. That is an amazing message. So Danny, how about you tell us a little bit about your the work that you've done? I know there you had mentioned that your dad, after he was diagnosed, took up watercolor painting.
Right. I'd be happy to. First of all, I want to say that no matter how many times I hear Cynthia's discussion about how the mask came about and what they mean, I'm deeply moved, and I've seen it firsthand. And I just wanted to give a shout out to my friend and her courage and her creativity, because one of the things that she has done, I believe that faces change us. I believe that encountering the face of suffering or the face of joy in another human being, and of course by face I mean the insides of that human being that are lavished out onto the flesh, they're born out onto the face, that changes us. And I think one of the things about dementia care that is so difficult is that we encounter these faces, these people, this lavishing out of maybe inside, and it's tough for us to deal with it. It's tough for us to deal with it. And Cynthia has given us the opportunity, in a way maybe that we can handle it better, to see the faces of dementia and to come to bring ourselves to that encounter. And it will change us. It will transform us. So I just had to say that about Cynthia's masks. I mean, they're wonderful. So Dad's creativity was absolutely stunning to our family and to people that knew Dad, because he had never done anything like this before. Dad was sinking into Alzheimer's and was very depressed. He was a very capable man who was losing his capabilities, his traditional capabilities. And it was tough for him to deal with that. So he became very depressed. He became withdrawn. And he had also aphasia. He had difficulty getting his words out, and he couldn't communicate with us well. So relationships suffered and all of that. But there's a wonderful dementia daycare center here in Tuscaloosa called Caring Days, a faith-based dementia daycare center. Dad attended Caring Days, and at Caring Days, exposed to both music therapy from the University of Alabama. He was exposed to not art therapy because they didn't have an art therapist, but a retired artist who was sharing his art and who innately knew a lot about how to teach it and facilitate it, and some dance and movement and some other things. So Dad found this incredible gift of watercolor art. He painted over 100 watercolors, originals, over about 3 years. And in those paintings, Dad is expressing his life story. Dad grew up in a sawmiller and farmer in rural Alabama, and his paintings express his early life stories. We have logs with wood rings in them. We have saws. We have his father's high-top shoes and a hat. We have even a sawmill worker that Dad worked with, an African-American man named Albert, who was one of his greatest friends in life. Dad painted Albert and him pulling a crosscut saw together. And this was late in Dad's life. So Dad really pulled up these memories and was able to express those. Well, looking at those paintings turned my life around, because I was in a very dark place because I felt like a failure, having not been able to advise Mother and Dad very well. Dad's creativity and character coming out through the art just got a hold of me. So I started writing poetry. I wrote poetry like it was going out of style. Every night I would write a poem, and that helped to buoy me along through the caregiving journey. So with that backdrop, that sort of set the stage for a transformation that happened in me. And I became an advocate for the use of these expressive art therapies and creativity in people living with dementia and their care partners, because it was also wonderful for my mother to be able to see this art. And so we formed a foundation called Cognitive Dynamics, and that's a 501c3, whose mission is to foster the arts and creativity in people with dementia and their care partners to improve quality of life and relationships, et cetera. So that's kind of the backdrop for the things that we've done. We have created a program called Bringing Art to Life that pairs students with people living with dementia, and under the auspices of an art therapist, they all have art therapy sessions together, and the students write creatively about this engagement and about how it's changing them. And we've done research on the program, and we have a big get together pre-COVID, of course, and we will do that again, to invite all the families in to see the art that's been created and to hear the stories and how the students have been changed. So that's what Dad's inspiration has done in terms of programming on our end.
I loved my day with you at the arts group, where we sang and we made art and all kinds of things. That was so much fun.
And Cynthia also spoke and played at our memory cafe. We have a memory cafe that was born out of the art class, and Cynthia came to that as well. And she can do it all, and she engages people so well. And the students learned so much from her because she taught them with great vulnerability and authenticity and honesty about what it's like, first person, to live with dementia. And that's what we need to hear as a society.
Yes.
Because this will bring about change. This will bring about change. That empathy grows, and this will bring about change.
Right, because there's so much stigma still in society. And again, using, Danny, using your dad's art, Cynthia using your masks, it creates places, safe places, I think, where people can have those conversations and ask questions. You're open, you're saying, I'm willing to have these conversations. I want to talk about my experience. And so people, if they are able to engage and have those questions answered, I think it really helps to lessen the stigma associated with people living with dementia, which is...
Yeah, and there is a huge stigma, but I think part of it is education. And part of it's fear. I mean, part of it's education, because people have never met somebody, or many people, I should say, haven't met somebody like myself in the very early stages. And they automatically, when they hear the word Alzheimer's or dementia, they think that you're catatonic in a nursing home, and that there's nothing that can be done for you except, spoon feed you or leave you to stare by yourself to think about whatever. But to be able to engage people, to say, don't focus on what I can't do. There's lots of things that we are not able to do as we age, or as just our health changes. I'm not able to do the things I did when I was 20, but I don't dwell on those things. I celebrate what I still can do and how I can still make a difference. And people living with Alzheimer's or another dementia, they're still able to contribute so much. We just have to stop putting barriers around them, and we just have to stop being paternalistic and letting people participate and serve. When we serve, it's such an uplifting experience. If somebody sets the table in the dining room, that's a way to serve. If somebody is a greeter at a church, that's just a wonderful way that person can serve. When we serve, we're helping others and we help ourselves.
Yeah. and you're providing opportunities, because if you have that notion that people with dementia aren't able to do anything, then you don't create opportunities for them to do anything. So it's a bit of a catch-22 where, there's nothing for them to do. So how can they show you that they can do it?
Exactly. What you just said is so important. The arts and creativity are stigma busters. They enable people to see that a person is still there. They are so supportive of personhood and its expression. And I think one of the reasons, and Cynthia, we talked about, I think one of the reasons that stigma is so strong is this belief, perhaps even unconfessed, that persons living with dementia are less persons than persons that are not living with dementia. That's not true, of course, but I think we unconsciously, many of us believe that. And the arts and creativity help to show people, hey, there's somebody there. This person can be engaged. This person has this creativity that can brighten the room and foster discussion, foster community. I think a lot of care partners, almost as a protection mechanism, render somebody or relegate somebody as less than, so that they don't have to realize how much they may be hurting or how much they may be suffering with dementia. So it's a protection mechanism that care partners have, I think, to relegate somebody less than. Well, the arts and creativity can counter that and do it in such a way that draws the care partner back in compassionately and into engagement with this person. So just a few thoughts about that.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking about, so often we think about what somebody can't do rather than what they can do. I was asked to give a talk for an organization that I won't name. And I wrote out my talk and I shared it with the organizers to make sure I was on message and that it met their parameters that they'd given me. They said, we'll give it to our DJ to read. And I said, if you want your DJ to give a talk, he'll have to write his own. This is my talk and I'm reading it. Or you can get somebody else. But it was like, we've never had anybody with dementia speak. And it's like, well, watch, or you don't have to speak loudly to me. I am not deaf. There's myths that people often will make that, or they'll think it's funny to make a joke to break the ice. Hey, Cynthia, remember that $5 I lent you? Yeah, it's, which isn't funny, but I think it comes out of a person's discomfort and maybe their lack of experience in dealing with somebody. And I think it's a fear that if Cynthia can get her or anybody, that, I'm a little worried about my memory. Maybe that's what I've got. So I think there's a lot going on, but I think, what you're doing with the students, working with them to teach them and to show them and to build the relationships, because when you have relationships, it just takes care of a lot of that stuff.
You're right. It does. So important.
And I heard and I read a lot about how people are trying to get away from the word therapy when it comes to art. What are your thoughts about that?
You want to start, Danny?
Sure. I'll start. Well, early on, after we had Dad's experience and I was trying to explore, what all this meant and what to do, I became friends with an art therapist named Angel Duncan, who is still a wonderful friend of mine and colleague. And she actually set up our art therapy programs and all of our arts programs through our foundation, and is still very much a part of that. She and a music therapy friend of mine, Carol Prickett, both educated me on the therapy part of things, mm-hmm. and how important it was to call therapy and to regard it as therapy and to not call things therapy that are not. So in other words, I think it's important to distinguish, when there is a procedure going on that has a practitioner who has been trained in this, often with a background in clinical psychology or a licensed marriage and family therapy, et cetera, and has someone who is in a clinically defined therapeutic relationship. I think it's important to call that what it is, because it gives honor to the process and also to the person that's trained to do it and has been through the time to do it. But we also have to realize how important it is to have arts and creativity experiences that are not therapy, that may not even be run by a therapist, I mean, there are many artists out there, like the artist George Parker that worked with my dad, who are gifted in what they do and who want to give back. And you don't have to be a therapist to give people joy and engagement in the moment and center them in the moment, and for it to be a positive experience. I think of our friends Cynthia, Don Windorf, and Linda Everman. They do musical interactions with people. It's not, quote, therapy, because I mean, Don's a clinical psychologist, but it's very important and equally important because of its engagement. So I think the nomenclature is important, because we have to honor those who've been through the training and who have this therapeutic relationship with their clients. But it's also equally important, and we sometimes call it arts and healthcare. Jill Sankey came up with that term, I believe. But arts and healthcare is equally important, because there are many artists who are gifted at sharing their art and at engaging groups of people. So that's kind of some comments I'd have about that.
Yeah. Cynthia, what about you?
I guess I had training as a teacher. That was one of my careers. And so part of that was learning enough to teach art to students. But when I think about the art therapy program, it reminds me that maybe if we thought about Alzheimer's or dementia as a disability rather than a disease that's going to immediately take your life, we could think about it as a disability. And just as people have therapies because they're injured or they're recovering, if we could think about dementia in a broader sense, and offer people speech therapy and art therapy, and maybe if they need mobility, occupational therapy, all those things can enrich a person's life. And so that just adds to the gifts that we can help people to stay where they are, or to enjoy where they are more fully, if that makes any kind of sense. So one of the movements that's happening right now is this discussion about how do we look at dementia, and is it possible if we could think of it more as a disability, especially because we're all different and we all progress at different rates. And if you just assume that everybody's at the end stages, and tomorrow, Lisa, you're diagnosed, and we say, okay, Lisa, you've got Alzheimer's now, so hand over your keys. You're not going to work anymore. We're not going to let you in the kitchen. You can't have any sharp objects. And you're not to leave the house without one of us. And unfortunately, that's the case for many people. And I think it comes from a place of love and protection many times, that people want to protect their loved one with dementia, but they don't realize that, we're all different in our abilities and in our struggles. And so we have to meet people where they are. But if we can enrich those life experiences with the arts, music, art, and theater, and what a wonderful way to help somebody.
Mm-hmm.
The expressive arts therapies also were helpful diagnostically at times. An art therapist can analyze the creativity of persons, and it can help to give that person a diagnosis, or to pick up conditions like depression, and frontotemporal dementia, et cetera. And as you know, when people create, sometimes the memories that come out may be actually unpleasant memories, maybe memories of trauma or something like that we have to deal with. And so the therapist can help that individual process that and work through that. And it can be an amazing thing to see that work. I've seen it work, and it's just incredible.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if, when you were diagnosed, if I were diagnosed, and before leaving the office, the doctor said, let me connect you with this wonderful arts program in your community, or this cafe where you can go and meet people and just enjoy a cup of coffee and some games, or just those kinds of, we need those places of positivity. We need those places where people can just be who they are and not worry about a label that's put on them.
Here. I agree. And this is so often not the case in physician offices, as you know. And one of the things that I'm passionate about is trying to change that. And of course, it's tough, but I'm trying to be an evangelist for that, because I know it needs to happen. I have, this is one of the most recent poems I've written. If you don't mind, I'll share it. It's actually for someone who's expressing grief. Poetry, I express a lot of things through poetry, as we all do who write or who create: grief, joy, loss, and so this one is expressing some grief. And this is from a care partner who has lost a loved one living with dementia. It's called Here. Here in the silent spaces of the night, searching the sky for traces of your light, praying your face will consecrate my sight. I am forever yours and you are mine. Spirit of twilight, wing me to the sea. That's where you promised you would wait for me. Lifting the curtain to eternity, holding me in the sunset of your eyes. If you can find a moment, will you sing? Something about a rosebud in the spring, lying upon the gravestone of a king. I'll sing along and promise not to cry. You are the silver thread in every moon. You are the dancing fireflies in June. You are the lyrics paired with every tune. Love always finds the ones who've flown away. I write a poem every day because it helps me get through the day. Some of them are not very good, but that's one of the themes of all this. The quality of the work doesn't have to be great. What it has to be is authentic and an expression of the insides of the human being. And that's what it's about. In
a way, it's like your journaling, right?
Exactly.
A lot of cognitive behavioral therapy is a lot about journaling.
I never did art, before my diagnosis, because I just was always very critical of myself and thinking about the product and how it would measure up. Now I just celebrate making art. It just makes me feel happy.
Cynthia, that's important. We've been doing the program for 10 years, and we've had a lot of artists in our program bringing art to life. And they sometimes have a hard time with it because of that very thing. They're holding themselves to the standard. They have stopped painting or stopped singing or stopped writing because they don't think that they can do it as well as they used to.
Right.
And so one of the things that the art therapists have done is say, listen, let's try to just be in the moment with this. Consider this as expressing your imagination, as play even. We're just having fun. And most of them will open up and do that. But there is a barrier there to people who have a past experience as a professional in the arts. It's tough for them to do it.
I think that we're entering a new era in just being aware that there's lots of different ways to communicate with people. And just because we can't be in person doesn't mean we can't engage.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. And what I hope happens is that these technologies that have now been developed and utilized so well will make their way into homes between individual care partners so that they can make use of an art gallery tour or of an art activity or of a group art engagement. And that organizations will make this technology available to people that may not have the means to buy it, so that we can really foster all of that in our greater community. And that's one of the things I hope happens.
Yeah, to ensure people have the equality and the equity of being able to access all of those resources is going to be really important to maintain this.
Even the toolkit, Cynthia, mailing out a toolkit that has art supplies in it with maybe a book, maybe not even having any technological, stuff in there, but they can do that without having to log on to anything.
That's the low-tech version.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things you said was so important, and I think we need to emphasize that being in the moment is something that we all need to do. It's good for our brains to be in the moment, that mindfulness practice, centering ourselves in the moment, being in flow. All of these things are very important for our brains, whether we have dementia or whether we don't. And so I think that what you just said about not disrupting someone who is creating, that's important.
And people engage in the arts for different reasons, right? Sometimes it's social. Sometimes it's because you want to just be in the moment. Sometimes you want to be creative.
Where I see it is the care partners are so hungry to chat with each other. They are so busy catching up because they haven't had those kinds of opportunities to chat with somebody who is kind of going through a similar experience. And so they're trading tips and it's that hunger that to be with another person who has a shared experience. And
I think it can be take you to your happy place too. I think it could be a means of escape. I think it was for Dad. And I think that may be why some of the scenes came out. These were happy places for him, places of rooting and grounding, and where everything was familiar and everybody knew him, and all of those things. So we have to process, as well. And so maybe that's also a reason to do art.
Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your experiences and your wisdom and your art. Definitely with this special series, we want to honor the arts as well, and to be able to post some of the work that our guests have presented to us. So, Cynthia, the mask that we were talking about earlier,
Yep.
Your poem, Danny, those would be great to be able to share with everyone. So thank you for your efforts in the arts and for keeping us all in the moment.
Thanks, Cynthia, Danny, and Lisa, for such a stimulating conversation. You can see some of Cynthia's masks on our website's resource page. You can also find out more information about both of these individuals and the activities that they are involved with through our show note accompanying this episode. In our next arts episode, Lisa interviews Ainsley Morehouse about improv and dementia. On March 15th, we are releasing our first Francophone episode, hosted by Ingrid Gagnon. This is the first of 6 episodes that we are very excited to be sharing with our Francophone community. I have found that the arts have really emerged in our discourse on dementia over the past while. There are so many exciting initiatives like the Beethoven Method, Reimagining Dementia, a Coalition for Justice, and the Cognitive Dynamics Foundation that Danny is associated with. As Danny said, arts and creativity are real stigma busters. Thanks to the Center for Education and Research on Aging and Health at Lakehead University, our institutional partner, and the Public Health Agency of Canada for its financial support. We end our episode today with Cynthia and Danny, joined in by Don Windrove and Ellen Potts, singing Leaning on the Everlasting Arms, an old Southern gospel or bluegrass tune and a favorite of theirs.
What have I to dread? What have I to fear? Leaning on the everlasting arms, I have blessed peace with my Lord so near. Leaning on the everlasting arms, leaning on Jesus, leaning on Jesus, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning on Jesus, leaning on Jesus, leaning on the everlasting arms.
Thanks for listening. My name is David Harvey.